On a summer afternoon in 2013, a businessman parked his luxury car on a street in central London. He was gone for about an hour. When he came back, parts of his car had melted. The mirror, the panels, warped and destroyed. And when investigators looked for the cause, they did not find a fire. They found a skyscraper. A brand new tower of glass, 37 floors tall, was quietly aiming a beam of concentrated sunlight down onto the street below. At the hottest spot, the light was strong enough to scorch carpets, blister paint, and cook an egg on the pavement. Reporters actually did it. They fried an egg on a London street, using nothing but a building. That is not even close to the strangest construction mistake ever made. Coming up, there is a bridge that started dancing with thousands of people on it, an airport that was finished but could not open for 9 years, a luxury tower that is leaning right now with people still living inside, and a skyscraper in New York with a secret so dangerous it was hidden from the entire city. Before we get into them, take 2 seconds to subscribe, because this is the kind of story this channel lives for. Now, back to the building that attacks cars. Londoners called it the walkie-talkie because of its strange curved shape, wider at the top than the bottom. And that shape was the whole problem. The south side of the tower curves inward, like a dish. So instead of scattering sunlight in every direction the way a flat building does, it collected the sun's rays and focused them onto one moving spot in the street. A spot that crept across the pavement as the sun moved, reaching temperatures far above what asphalt, plastic, or paint could survive. The newspapers gave it crueler names: the walkie-scorchy, the fry-scraper. The developers rushed out apologies, paid for the car repairs, and eventually bolted a giant permanent sunshade of metal fins across the south face of the tower to kill the death ray for good. But the truly unbelievable part is this: it had happened before. Years earlier in Las Vegas, a curved glass hotel had done the exact same thing, focusing sunlight down onto its own pool deck, singeing guests and melting plastic cups, a beam the staff nicknamed the Death Ray. Same curved design, same burning beam, and the same architect. One of the most celebrated designers in the world had built the same mistake twice, on 2 different continents. Now, a burning beam is embarrassing, but at least it only ruins your paint job. Germany managed to embarrass itself for 9 straight years without hurting anyone at all. Berlin decided to build a grand new airport worthy of a reunited capital. The terminal rose, the runways were paved. Invitations went out for the grand opening in 2012. And then, just weeks before the first flight, inspectors delivered devastating news. The fire safety system, the network that should pull smoke out of the building in an emergency, did not work. The opening was cancelled. Not delayed a few weeks. Cancelled. Again and again. Year after year. And an unused airport still costs a fortune. Empty trains had to keep running through the underground station just to keep air moving in the tunnels. Lights burned that could not simply be switched off. Hundreds of flight information screens hung there, displaying nothing for so long that they wore out and had to be replaced before the first traveler ever arrived. When the airport finally opened in 2020, 9 years late, its cost had swollen to roughly 3 times the original plan, reaching into the billions. Germany, famous worldwide for engineering perfection, had built a punchline. But that mistake was only expensive. The next one put thousands of human bodies in motion at the same time. In the year 2000, London opened its first new bridge across the Thames in more than a century. A sleek, futuristic footbridge linking St. Paul's Cathedral to the Tate Modern Gallery. On opening day, enormous crowds poured onto it, up to 90,000 people crossing in a single day. And within minutes, something deeply strange began to happen. The bridge started to sway. Not shake, sway, swinging gently side to side beneath thousands of feet. And then came the part engineers had never planned for. As the deck swayed, people instinctively adjusted their steps to keep balance, all of them, at the same time, in the same rhythm. Thousands of strangers accidentally walking in perfect sync. And that synchronized marching pushed the bridge harder, which made it sway more, which made the crowd sync up even tighter. A feedback loop of human footsteps, feeding a swinging bridge. 2 days after its grand opening, the famous new bridge was closed in embarrassment. It stayed closed for almost 2 years while engineers quietly installed dozens of hidden shock absorbers underneath the deck, at a cost of millions. It reopened rock solid, but Londoners had already given it a permanent nickname: the Wobbly Bridge. London got lucky, because a wobble caught early is just an expensive embarrassment. A wobble ignored becomes something much darker. And in 1940, on the west coast of America, the world found out exactly what. That year, engineers completed one of the longest suspension bridges on Earth, stretching across a windy strait in Washington state. The Tacoma Narrows Bridge was slim, elegant, and modern. It was also alive. From the very first days, drivers noticed the deck rising and falling beneath them like a slow ocean wave. Locals nicknamed it Galloping Gertie, and some drove across just for the thrill, like a roller coaster you could take to work. 4 months after opening day, the wind hit about 65 kilometers per hour. Not a hurricane, not even a serious storm, but at that exact speed, the bridge began to twist. One side of the deck lifting, while the other side plunged. The entire roadway wringing itself like a towel. Concrete and steel bending in ways concrete and steel should never bend. For about an hour, the bridge twisted harder and harder while cameras rolled. Then the deck tore apart and crashed into the water below. Every person escaped in time. The only life lost was a small dog, too frightened to leave a stranded car. It is a quiet, sad detail in an otherwise miraculous escape, and it is worth remembering before we talk about the famous film. Because the black and white footage of that collapse became one of the most studied engineering videos ever recorded. The lesson inside it still echoes today. The wind does not need to be strong to destroy you. It only needs to find your rhythm. You might expect a lesson that dramatic to belong safely to the past. So let me show you a construction mistake that people are living inside at this very moment. In downtown San Francisco stands a gleaming 58-floor tower of luxury apartments, one of the tallest homes in the city, with units that sold for millions and a penthouse worth more than $10 million. It opened in 2009 as the address for the city's elite. There was just one detail buried in the design. The tower's foundations rest on hundreds of supports driven into deep, soft clay. They never reached the solid bedrock far below. Year by year, quietly, the building sank. By the time residents were officially told, the tower had already settled well over a foot into the ground, and worse, it was not sinking evenly. It was leaning. At the top, the lean eventually grew to more than 70 centimeters off center. Cracks appeared in the pavement outside. Lawsuits exploded. Millionaires discovered they had bought apartments in a modern leaning tower. The rescue attempt sounds like fiction. Engineers had to reach down through soft clay and anchor part of the tower to the bedrock it should have touched from the start, slowly transferring the building's enormous weight onto the new supports. Then came the twist nobody wanted. As the work began, the tower briefly started sinking faster. The rescue itself was making things worse, and everything had to stop while engineers scrambled to understand why. The fix was eventually completed, and the tower is now considered stable, but apartments there have been reselling at brutal losses. Concrete can be repaired, a reputation is much harder. Every mistake so far had one thing in common. The public knew about it. The final story on this list is different, because it is the construction mistake that was deliberately hidden from an entire city. In 1977, a spectacular skyscraper opened in Manhattan, 59 floors of silver glass, and its party trick was at the bottom. The whole tower stood on 4 giant columns, placed not at the corners, but at the center of each side, so the building seemed to float above a church on the corner of the block. It was praised as a daring, structural masterpiece. 1 year later, the engineer behind it received a phone call. A student had been studying the building and had a polite question about how it would handle strong winds striking diagonally at the corners. The engineer ran the numbers again to reassure them. Instead, he uncovered a nightmare. During construction, key joints in the tower's skeleton had been bolted together instead of welded, a change that looked harmless on paper. Combined with those diagonal winds, it meant a powerful storm, the kind that strikes New York every few decades, could tear the connections apart and bring a 59-floor skyscraper down into the middle of Manhattan. What happened next sounds like a thriller. The engineer confessed to the building's owners, and a secret repair began. Every night, after the office workers went home, welding crews slipped into the tower and reinforced the weak joints one by one, then vanished before morning. The public was told almost nothing. Emergency evacuation plans for the surrounding blocks were quietly drawn up, and in the middle of the repairs, a hurricane began moving up the coast toward New York, racing the welders. The storm turned out to sea. The welding was finished. The building stood, and it still stands today. Here is the part that saves the story from being a villain's tale. The full truth stayed hidden for almost 20 years, until a magazine finally revealed it. And when it came out, the engineer was not destroyed. He was respected, because he had done the one thing engineers are most afraid to do. He found his own catastrophic mistake, admitted it, and fixed it before it could kill anyone. Which brings us to one last tower, and a question that flips this whole video on its head. Because the most famous construction mistake in human history is not hidden, not demolished, and not repaired. It is protected. Over 800 years ago, builders in the Italian city of Pisa began raising a marble bell tower on ground that was far too soft. Before they even finished the 3rd floor, the tower was visibly sinking on one side. Their solution was to keep building anyway, making the upper floors slightly taller on the sinking side to compensate, which is why the tower is not just leaning, it is actually curved like a banana. Wars kept interrupting construction for decades, and those long pauses accidentally let the soil settle, which is probably the only reason it survived at all. By the late 20th century, the lean had grown so severe that engineers feared collapse, and the tower was closed for over a decade while they carefully removed soil from beneath the high side to pull it back. And here is the beautiful part. They could have straightened it much further. They chose not to. They corrected it just enough to make it safe and deliberately preserved the lean. Because that mistake now draws millions of visitors a year and powers an entire city's economy. The error became the treasure. So maybe the real lesson of all these stories is not that builders fail, it is what happens after the failure. The same kind of mistake, handled differently, becomes a punchline in Berlin, a lawsuit in San Francisco, a legend in New York, and a wonder of the world in Pisa. Now it is your turn. Every country has one, a bridge, a tower, a stadium, or a road that everyone remembers for going hilariously expensively wrong. Tell me the biggest construction fail in your country in the comments, because the best answers might become a future video. And one more question before you go. Knowing everything you now know, would you buy a cheap apartment in San Francisco's Leaning Tower? Be honest, I will be reading every comment.